Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine and the world on the 5th of August of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, of course, we are going to talk about the United States of America, more precisely about stock market, because today is the blackest Monday ever since the beginning of the world. As I understand, the American stock market has collapsed by almost 2 trillions in 15 minutes since opening. Economies of entire countries are collapsing all over the world. What's happening? The Tokyo Stock Exchange has fallen by 13 since morning, a repeat of Black Monday in 1987. Tokyo has dragged Taiwan and Korea down with it, minus 8%. In Turkey, all trading had to be urgently closed. The rapid decline threatening to collapse the stock exchange. The Moscow exchange is also falling. The entire market is red. One of the most authoritative American banks, Goldman Sachs, is in a panic. Experts have urgently raised their probability of recession in the United States from 15 until 25%. The head of Intel began praying directly on Twitter before the market opened. It didn't help. Crypto is also finished. This is where investors used to save their savings, but over the last 24 hours, 1 trillion was withdrawn from crypto markets. Yesterday, before the collapse, Warren Buffett sold half of his Apple shares at once. He left his free money in cash. The volume of cash in Berkshire Hathaway has grown to 278 billion. The situation is critical, and of course Trump is already blaming Biden and Kamala for worldwide stock market collapse. So this is very interesting, and this is another attack against Democrats and another few points in Trump's favor. And now we understand, of course, we understand what the world needs, and we understand that the the United States of America, reading quotes, needs another very small but very fast war where they can win, and most likely Iran is going to be the next. So let's wait and we'll see, obviously. Now let's talk about Ukraine. We have a lot of very interesting updates and details on the ground. During the previous video we were talking that Ukrainians most likely have redeployed their F-16s in Odessa area, and we got the video. The Ukrainian sources published the video yesterday of the F-16 flying above the sky of this small part of Ukraine, and according to information we have, most likely the Russians managed to discover the positions of F-16s, and during the day the Bastion missile system launches from Crimean coast missile strike after additional reconnaissance by drones. And the sources are saying, according to information from the open source, Bastion is the system against let's say ships in the sea, but also Bastions are the Zircon carriers, so most likely the Russians attack the southern part of Odessa with Zircons. So let's wait for additional updates. Maybe we will receive the first F-16 destroyed, not even in the sky, but maybe somewhere on the ground. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in Rabotino area. And this morning we got the video of how the Russians were clearing the trenches and the Ukrainian positions exactly in this point, in this small artillery pocket between Rabotino and Verbovo, and we had some doubts how exactly the Russians managed to read the point, and we were waiting for additional, let's say, changes on the map from different mappers to make a common opinion of what was happening there. And today we got a report from neutral mappers that most likely the Russians were attacking in this direction on the line between Verbovo and Rabotino. So the Russians captured these fields using these roads of attacks. We have adjusted the map altogether. Now let's move further, and we have additional updates from the area of Mala-Takmachka. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they managed to discover and to destroy a small Russian ammo depot in the area of the village by the name of Novokarlovka. Now let's talk about Urozhaino. We have changes on the ground, as you can see. Before talking about changes, first let's take a look at this video. In this video we can see how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian logistic infrastructure, Ukrainian positions right in the vicinity of the main bridges between one part of Novosilovka, Velika Novosilovka, and another. Few FAPs arrived. Most likely the Ukrainians suffered losses. A little bit to the northeast we got another village. The village of Razdolne. A few more FABs arrived in this area. Significant number of FABs in this direction tell us just about one thing: the Russians are planning to move further in the northern direction. And today we got a lot of videos of how the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions. We had the videos that were published from the Ukrainian sources, and this video we can see the Ukrainian drone of a 20th Special Battalion that was flying above the tree lines in the fortifications somewhere in the vicinity of Arozhayne, and as a result of another FPV drone strike, the Russians lost FPV drone operator. This event took place exactly in this point, and based on these two videos, we have adjusted the map and added additional territory under complete Russian control, so the Russians began moving. Now let's talk about Pokrovsk direction. We have additional updates from this territory. During the day we haven't received anything additional in comparison with the previous video. The only thing we got is very interesting video that we received from Pokrovsk direction. The Russians discovered the positions of armored forces of Ukraine, maybe some big ammo depot or something like this, and they attacked the same place with 2 Iskander missiles. So after the first strike, the Russians attacked the same area with second missile. As you can see, they managed to deal significant damage. The Russians were attacking the industrial zone in the vicinity of the city by the name of Rodinskaya. So this is the territory that was attacked by the Russians. Now let's move further. According to information we have, the Russians continue improving their positions inside of the village Zhelane, and most likely tomorrow or the day after tomorrow the Ukrainians will withdraw their position and abandon the village completely, because they have no chances to hold this area for a very long time. Most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back towards Nova Zhelane, and of course this is going to be the next target only after the fall of Sergeyevka, Vesele, Ivanovka and Lisichino. Now let's move further. We have significant number of updates and details from Toretsk, New York agglomeration. There are very heavy clashes. The Russians are pushing, the Ukrainians are withdrawing their positions, and we see no, let's say, white point in this black tunnel for the Ukrainians to stabilize the situation. First, let's talk about the western New York area. During the previous few days, during the previous weeks, the Russians were moving from New York towards Valentimonovka and Alexandropol, but starting this week and starting probably late the second part of the previous week, we stopped receiving any updates from the Russian side about additional and further progress in the western direction, and we were wondering why. Most likely the main target, the main goal of the Russians during the first phase, let's say, of Toretsk offensive operation was to get as close as possible, and if it's possible, to cut the main supply road between Sukhaya Balka and New York. And as we understand, according to geolocations and according to different mappers update, most likely the Russians managed to do this. So the road was cut and logistic was ruined. Furthermore, the Russians established certain FPV drone control over the road. They were attacking the Ukrainians with FPV drones, and who probably managed to cross, to bypass, to let's say, to pass through this area. The Russians were attacking in New York by physical attacks. What is important about this, also today we got another video from the area between the village of Petrovka and New York itself and Toretsk. In this video we can see how the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions, also right to the east from another bridge that was also destroyed. As you can see in this video, the bridge was destroyed probably in the past. So we're talking about this bridge, and the bridge is destroyed. If we increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of July, we're gonna see that there was another bridge a little bit further in the northern direction between Kliban Byk and New York itself. This bridge was also destroyed. In the video of how the Russians destroyed this bridge we got somewhere on the 18th of July. So as you can see, the logistic of armored forces of Ukraine collapsed in this area. Of course, there are a lot of local roads. The roads with a very poor quality, maybe some pontoon bridges, but of course the Ukrainians are no longer have the centralized logistic in this direction. Most of the bridges were already destroyed, or most of the roads were already captured by the Russians physically. Now let's talk about Toretsk agglomeration. As you can see, we have significant number of changes on the ground, and now it's very difficult to understand what exactly is happening here. For example, on the street by the name of Kosmichная, we got the video how the Ukrainians were bombing the Russians, for the Ukrainians of 32nd Mechanized Brigade were bombing the Russians exactly in this building that we can find the icon on the map. And after a very heavy artillery strike, the Russian soldiers left the building and start running towards Stepova Street. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps, and let's return back on map. The Ukrainians attacked this territory and then the Russians moved in this direction. And based on this, we have adjusted the map. Later, also, we have already discussed this in the previous update. The Russian sources published the video how they managed to ambush the Ukrainian Humvee, probably as a result of grenade launcher strike. And in the final part of the video, we can see the Russian soldier who left the building and start attacking probably the Ukrainians who managed maybe to survive after this explosion. The Russians were finishing the things that they started. This attack took place exactly in this point, and based on this video we have adjusted the map, and most of the mappers have adjusted as well and added additional territory under complete Russian control. But later, right before we start making this evening video, this evening report, we got another video that was published by the Ukrainian sources. This is the video that was published by Special Detachment Special Forces Lut assault troopers. They are pretty, let's say, how to say, famous. They used to fight in Klishchevka. They used to fight in Volchansk when there was an urgent need to stabilize the situation. They've been fighting almost everywhere, all over the entire line of combat contacts. They're well equipped, as you can see. They have a lots of probably good money, they're sponsored by people, so they are very, very experienced and have lots of weapons to show. And the Ukrainian sources, the video show us the clashes right exactly in this part of Pivnichna or Druzhba. One of the episodes from that long video took place exactly in the vicinity of this building. So based on this video, we can make a conclusion that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly deep inside of the territory of that was under Ukraine control. For now, we don't know for sure. I can't answer you the next question, whether that was the fight and clashes with the regular Russian army or just with sabotage and reconnaissance group. If you ask my opinion, I think that was the clashes between Ukrainian soldiers and Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group who managed to, let's say, to bypass, to move through the Ukrainian defense belt, through the Ukrainian main forces. And the main reason of this, let's say, landing operation that was conducted by the Russians to cut the main supply roads between Toretsk and Pivnichna and Druzhba itself. And while the Russians were here, while the Russians were controlling these two main streets, the main Russian forces were moving in direction of one of the strongholds, one of the Toretsk strongholds. We are talking about the coal mine and the landfill of Pivnichna, so about this territory. So we don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the positions. We don't know, but we know that there are already Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group, which also confirms that there are lots of problems in Ukrainian defense. On the other hand, we also received very interesting videos from the area from the areas that are considered as contested. Before that, let's talk about this map update. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, everything, let's say, along the tree lines, along these forests were captured by the Russians. But on the other hand, the Russian sources, for example, in this video, shows that how the Russians were attacking and FPV droning the Ukrainian positions in this part of Pivnichna. Maybe the video is archived, maybe this is something like an attempt from the Ukrainian side to unblock the area and to counterattack the Russians. For now, we don't have the exact answer to this question. This is another video that shows another Russian FPV drone strike on Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of the coal mine and the landfill, which also confirms that maybe the Ukrainians conducted a series of counterattacks trying to increase their positions to stabilize the area. Maybe they managed to redeploy additional forces. We don't know. The only thing we have geolocations, and obviously we understand that time will tell and time will explain us everything. So let's wait for additional day, for additional few hours. Most likely during the next video there are going to be additional updates and we will change the map. Maybe the Ukrainian defense have already collapsed, and maybe the Ukrainians have already moved further to Toretsk, and now the edge Ukrainian positions are somewhere in the vicinity of this citadel. Furthermore, we got additional videos from Druzhba. The Russians continue clearing and attacking the last buildings in this village. The Russians are moving, and obviously there are not so many days left for the Ukrainians in this part of the village. The Russians are moving along the railways, and soon they will be able to get the most northwestern outskirts of this small settlement. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Chasiv Yar. During the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we haven't received almost anything, just the regular updates of how the Russians were bombing and hunting the Ukrainian forces in this area without any changes on the ground. Now let's talk about Seversk direction. As you can see, we have significant number of geolocations. We have already discussed a batch of geolocations between Fedorovka and Perezhny itself. The Russians were attacking this territory, have been attacking this area for the previous few days, and now the Russians opened, let's call it like this, another front line in this direction, and currently there is a very powerful artillery preparation towards the village of Verkhnekamyanska, and according to geolocations of the strikes, of attacks, of aviation strikes, artillery strikes, we can make a conclusion that the Russians are about to launch a full-scale offensive operation towards this village from many directions, from Ivanodarevka, from Sporna. The Russians probably will attack this area from Topolevka and Lysychansk oil refinery. Most likely the Russians will try to attack the same area from Zolotarevka. So let's wait, because if the Russians are able to take under control this village, or at least as a result of first, let's say, stage offensive in this direction, if the Russians are able to take under control the stronghold that located between Verkhnekamyanska and Russian territory, obviously this is going to be significant results, significant success for the Russians. Then they will be able to move further in the western direction and to basically to begin the battle for Seversk itself. We are talking about this stronghold. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were bombing this small forest. It's like already the base of Bila Gora, the biggest, the highest point in this direction, which also confirms that the Russians have certain plans about this territory. So let's wait and we will receive. Now let's talk about northern Kupiansk direction. As you can see, here we can find just regular military activity. The Russians were bombing this territory with tall flamethrower systems. The Russians were bombing this territory with aviation. But as you can see, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received any updates that confirms or give us any updates, piece of news regarding additional progress on the ground. Kharkiv direction, the same story. As for Kharkiv, there are few important things and very interesting videos. Let's talk about Volchansk itself. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians published a lot of videos of how they were FPV droning the Russians inside of aggregate plant. It's very difficult to understand what were the main purposes of Ukrainian attacks, but during the previous days, the group of forces North stated lots about possible Ukrainian attempts to counter attack. Maybe this is the beginning of the clearing operation. Maybe the Ukrainians are planning to attack the aggregate plant, and after that they will try to expand their offensive further in the northern direction. The Russians were bombing the main supply and main rotation evacuation roads between the north and the south of Volchansk, trying to destroy the Ukrainian evacuation team and supply team. In the eastern part of Volchansk, the Russians were bombing Tikha, another another portion of those flamethrowers missiles entered the village, damaging significantly the Ukrainian positions. This is very weird and probably the most mystic village in Volchansk direction. The Russians are bombing this territory almost every single day, but yet we haven't received any geolocation, well, let's say with FPV drone or let's say with artillery, just very heavy artillery like those flamethrowers and like aviation. So what is happening there? It's very interesting and very mystic. Now let's move to Kharkiv. Today some Ukrainian resistance, as I understand. Today the forces of Ukrainian resistance burned and destroyed completely one of the blocks, one of the facility of energy infrastructure of the city. And of course this is very interesting how the resistance of Kharkiv managed to do this. But we can tell for sure that the situation here is worsening. As for Sumy direction, we have very interesting report from people on the ground, let's say from locals, from people who are living in Sumy region. Today we got a post that unofficially the person from Sumy today posted in his Telegram channel that unofficially we, the people from Sumy, have been advised to leave Sumy by the Ukrainian military. This is not a mass or official announcement. This is more like a quiet piece of advice. They are expecting Russia to open up the front this week. So by the end, let's say by the 10th of August, there are very high chances that the Russians will launch another full-scale operation in direction of Sumy. Meanwhile, the Russians are fighting with the Ukrainians in the vicinity of Sotnitsky Kozachok. In this video, for example, we can see the returns of Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group from the territory of Russian Federation. They were completely empty. They probably finished their job, their mission, but the Russians were flying above their heads. They discovered this sabotage group, and then the Russians start bombing their temporary position. A little bit further in the southeastern direction, we have additional, let's say, reconnaissance operation. The Russians discovered the positions of mortar system, and as a result of artillery strike, that mortar system was destroyed. So as you can see, the clashes in Ukraine are just intensifying, and most likely Ukraine F-16s will not be able to change the situation in the sky and in the ground, and the Black Monday probably will cause very big damage to Ukraine economy as well, and also to the financial or to the additional aids that Western countries can send to Ukraine. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.